What's up, fellas? It's your main man back on the scene with another video. I'm gonna check out this video with this lovely lady right here. We're not African, exposing self-hate and lies and foundational Black American ideology. There's a lot of interest in FBA. And it seems to upset a lot of folks. A lot of color folks is upset around the world. So she's going to read this letter, and whoever wrote the letter, I don't think they articulated very well, but let's do it.
Before I break down this email point by point, I want to read it for you. Wayne Tesfaye, much of your perspective is correct. However, what you are missing is what exists at ground level. The divisiveness of the FBA labeling and description came about out of necessity in order to survive, exist. Black Americans for several decades strained actually begged.
Right here, I don't agree with the letter, divisiveness. How is defining who you are divisive? All blacks around the world get to identify with whatever ethnic group they claim. It is not divisive, but if we do the exact same thing, we're being divisive. Let's go.
Many times for unity with all ethnic groups of color, especially Africans from the motherland, because we have been on our own for hundreds of years, and because we know the value and the need for unity for our survival. That was the reason that FBAs fought, died in the struggle to change laws so other people of color could come, unite, and help. But all they, FBAs, faced from those,
which is a mistake, by the way, but let's rock and roll,
who have come were constant and forever belittling insults, labels, and facial looks of disgust. Treating, speaking, looking down upon them, us, as though Black Americans are inferior. FBAs experienced this from all groups that have fled to America. All of these fleeing groups have said, let the Negro fight his own battles. We do not want to align with them. These groups that flee from their lands come and say to the
Now they talk about LULAC, which was a Mexican organization back in the 50s. They didn't want to rock with Dr. King and them. They basically told they didn't want to fight for civil rights. They were fighting for the right to be white. So they told blacks to kick rocks.
FBA, we do not care about your fight or your history. We have not come to fight. We have only come to make money and take care of our own. In essence, we do not care about this country or anything in it except for what we can drain and take from it for our own purposes. The displaying of their various country flags show this. I have personally been told this to my face, even recently before President Donald Trump.
This is true. That part right there is true. People waving. They don't come here to be American. Whatever they were, wherever they came from, and this is not limited to Africans. It's pretty much non-whites in general. They want to hang on to whatever they were back there. Let's go.
Trump's mass deportations. This causes and has caused great immense pain and humiliation within our community. We have given so much that they may come, and they turn their noses up at us. As Black Americans, we have developed a collective instinctive reaction response. We become hardened, as we have learned, through hundreds of years without any help from the outside world. And that we must do this for survival against all who hurt.
That's not necessarily true, but let's go.
Hurt us. These microaggressions permeate from those who flee throughout this land. So we have labeled them as cowards that have fled, wanting the proximity to whiteness in order to obtain preferential treatment in favor above FBAs. And they have gotten it. So let's break down this email point by point. Let's start with point number 1. The divisiveness of FBA labeling came out of necessity for survival. First, let's acknowledge an undeniable fact. Black Americans have been fighting for their survival for centuries, often alone. The trauma of slavery, Jim Crow, police brutality, and mass incarceration have forced African Americans to develop self-reliance and resilience in a way that is unique. No one is dismissing that. But here's the issue. Divisiveness is not survival. It's a reaction to pain.
It's not divisive. It's just self-identification. Every other group gets to identify themselves with how they want to identify or delineate. They want to be whatever they were from wherever they came from. Fine. But then we get to do the same thing. That's all that is. It's not about hating someone because they're from Africa or Haiti or Jamaica. is you guys want to hang on to wherever you were, from wherever you came from, fair enough. But then we get to do the same thing. That's all that is. It has nothing to do with hate.
And betrayal, but it's not a strategy for long-term power. If unity didn't work before, it's not because black people across the diaspora weren't trying. It's because white supremacy has always deliberately kept us apart. The FBA response, instead of
She gets a point for that one.
healing that division, is deepening it by turning on the very people who should be allies. So I challenge you, instead of saying we had to be divisive for survival, ask yourself,
Well, whoever wrote that letter, they're not very, they didn't articulate the situation very well. So it's a bad letter. Let's go.
yourself, who benefits from that division? Because it surely isn't black people. Let's get to the next point, number 2. FBAs fought and died so other people of color could come, unite, and help, but they never did. This statement assumes that black immigrants have contributed nothing to the black struggle in America, which is historically false. Caribbean immigrants, for instance, played a very important role in the civil rights movement. Take Kwame Ture, for instance, who is from Trinidad and who has played an important role in the civil rights movement and the global Pan-African movement. Or
This is true, but here's the difference between back then and right now. Back then, their numbers were very small, so they had no alternative but to integrate into the larger black society. Today, since there is hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions of their countrymen or whatever, ethnic group or whatever you want to call it, here they delineate, they separate themselves. So this right here does not apply today.
Marcus Garvey, one of the most influential black leaders, and who happened to come from Jamaica. Or let's take
Add some context to that. Marcus Garvey tried his movement in Jamaica first, and they rejected it. He had to come here because we were already on that tip. That's why we took to it, because we were already thinking about it. It didn't work in Jamaica because they didn't want that. See, she left that part out. That's the part that never gets spoken on.
Malcolm X, whose mother was from the Caribbean island Grenada. Let's not forget to talk about the power.
Who cares where his mother came from? That's his mother, not him. He was born here, his daddy was from here, and they got into the movement. Now let's say, again, back then there wasn't that many of them here, so they had to integrate with us. But today, since there's more of them here, they stick to themselves pretty much. They separate themselves. So you can't use the situation from back in the 50s and the 1920s and all that for today.
And important role of African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of independent Ghana, who was one of the most vocal African leaders in supporting the civil rights movement and black liberation in the United States. Kwame Nkrumah personally invited Martin Luther King to Ghana's independence celebrations in 1957. This visit profoundly impacted Martin Luther King, reinforcing his belief that black people worldwide were part of a common struggle for freedom. Malcolm X was also welcomed in Ghana and met with Nkrumah, strengthening his Pan-African.
So my whole problem with that is, if they were so down with black folks, why didn't they offer return on the level of Israel at that time? Because they didn't have to go through all types of hoops and climb mountains and fight lions and tigers on the way up to get citizenship.
Vision. Ghana was and continues to be a safe haven for African Americans. W.E.B. Du Bois moved to Ghana and was given Ghanaian citizenship, where he worked.
Back then. Today, you have to wait like 10 years. Ain't nobody doing all that. Come on. We can't hit the ground running. We're not interested. If you offer return on the level of Israel, and they should have done that during the height of the Black Power movement, they would have gotten a better response.
worked on the Encyclopedia Africana until his death in 1963. And then let's not forget to talk about the support by Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie I. He was deeply respected by African American leaders, including Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, and members of the Nation of Islam. Ethiopia used its position in the United Nations to push against apartheid in South Africa and racial discrimination in the US. He was a key force in the formation of the Organization of African Unity, which worked to connect African struggles with black liberation struggles worldwide. Historically, African Americans and Africans on the continent have always supported each other in their liberation struggle. When Italy invaded Ethiopia during the Second World War, so
back then. See, she's correct. Back then. We're talking about today.
many African Americans signed up to volunteer to fight on the side of the Ethiopians against the invading colonial Italian army. However, eventually they were blocked from the US government. They were ready to die and fight for Ethiopia. Imagine that. However, one brother made it, Colonel John Robinson, the brown condor of...
Yeah, they did do that. Like I said, and that's the argument that I've been having with foreign blacks that come here, is we have the same enemy, the same problem. It may manifest itself differently, but it's the same problem. But they don't want to acknowledge that.
Harlem. You should definitely research his mind-blowing, inspiring history. He was one of the very few African-American black aviators of his time, and he showed solidarity with Ethiopia by volunteering as a fighter pilot and military advisor during Italy's invasion of Ethiopia in 1935, defying racial barriers and US neutrality policies. He helped train Ethiopian pilots, fought against Mussolini's...
So was it U.S. neutrality policies, or was it racism, or both? But after the war, and I have to do some more research on this, I am told that when the brothers tried to settle there, and they weren't too kind with them. The locals didn't really want them there. So I have to do some research on that.
Forces and symbolized African-American support for anti-colonial struggles in Africa. Not just historically, African people continue to support the black liberation struggle in the USA and are actively involved in racial justice movements. Many activists that fight against racism and oppression in America are of Caribbean and African descent. In cities like Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered, Ethiopian and Somali communities were on the front lines of the protests. And even in Ethiopia, I was in Addis Ababa at that time, Ethiopians came together to mourn the murder and the death of George Floyd, and came together in solidarity with their black brothers and sisters in America. The idea that FBAs were left to fight alone ignores centuries of African and Caribbean solidarity in black liberation movements and is simply not supported by history. African nations provided sanctuary, funding, and diplomatic pressure to assist black struggles in the US.
Hold on. I look like the Jacksons.
Provided sanctuary, funding.
Is that Michael Jackson? I know that's Malcolm X. These guys here look like the Jacksons. Let me know, man. Somebody drop a comment. Is this Michael Jackson?
And diplomatic pressure to assist black struggles in the US. Pan-African leaders recognized the shared fight for black liberation, understanding that oppression in the US was linked to colonialism and apartheid in Africa. Without Africa's contributions, the civil rights movement and black power movements would have been much weaker. Could there be more unity? Of course. But erasing contributions because of a few bad...
Well, what policy was pushed for by African nation? I mean, somebody let me know. I could be missing something that was actually passed here in the United States.
Experiences? That's not historical accuracy. That's emotional reasoning. So the question to those who push the FBA ideology is this: if African people and African leaders have fought for and supported black liberation movements in the US, why continue pushing division instead of solidarity? Let's get to the next point. Point number 3. Black immigrants look down on FBAs and want proximity to whiteness.
It's true. This is true. Let's cut the BS. You don't know because you're not here. But this is true. So I have to deduct a point on this one.
This argument is rooted in personal experience, not systemic reality.
No, this is systemic reality. That's why it's going on. Because it happens so much. People are like, hold up. All these people that are speaking all this anti-black stuff, where are they from? And they're from somewhere else. 9 times out of 10, they're from somewhere else. So yes, it does matter. We've been checking the paperwork, and it's not coming back clean. This is where the whole tether thing comes from. You have your rider blacks from other countries, and they are very welcome. But what they're calling the tether class, we're telling them to kick rocks, eat shit.
Yes, some immigrants have internalized anti-blackness. Unfortunately, that's a colonial legacy that exists in most places in the world, in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Latin America. But so have many African Americans and people identifying as foundational black Americans. There is a reason why colorism, classism, and internalized racism exists within all black communities.
This is true. I was date this chick. She was part of the light-skinned proper Negro class here in the United States. Her mom did not like my black ass. She wanted her to marry a light-skinned black man or a white man.
Including the US. Yes, it's true, some immigrants distance themselves from African Americans. But let's be real, many FBAs do the same thing. If we are keeping it honest, many FBAs hold negative stereotypes about Africans, calling them jungle people, booty scratchers, mocking their accents.
This does happen.
Like it or not, you from Africa.
I'm from Africa, you from Africa, you African booty scratcher.
So you said the problem can go both ways.
And it won't work. We can't work with Dakota.
We should be trying to solve that.
Or dismissing them as fresh off the boat. I have seen so many stand-up comedy shows where African Americans were mocking Africans. I mean, just take a look at this nonsense.
Yeah, I didn't like this one. When I first saw it, I didn't like it. I wasn't amused by it at all. It's not funny to me.
You know what's fucked up? African people don't like black people.
Well, you know, a friend of mine from Nigeria, he was telling me about this. The people that's coming with the smoke is the top 1%, and they give it to them back there. So, again, it's true. There's truth to it. You can't just dismiss it like it's a personal experience. When there's a bunch of us having the exact same experience, then it means that's a problem.
Y'all know they treat us like shit. They talk down to us. They think they better than us. And I don't understand because we from the same tribe, kind of. But they like white people, though. They treat y'all like family. As soon as y'all come around, they get excited. Excuse me, Mr. White Man. Thank you for bringing us here. We love you. Yeah, the white man.
Come on, man. The reason why it's funny, because it's based on fact. Brother I used to ride to work with, it's a Jamaican brother, Brother Larry. Good brother. Again, this is a rioter brother. We all black. We used to talk about this stuff, how, you know, like if you leave the United States, like where you going to go? Can't go to African countries, because he's like, man, they'll kill your ass for the white man. Love the white man. Because we used to talk about that stuff. So the same thing in Jamaica, same thing. They'll do anything for the white man. So it's like, you can't go nowhere. It's like, what are you going to do? So there's truth to that. Or it's essentially true. That's why this one is funny. The first one I ain't like.
If we want to fix this, the solution is not more division, fam. It's confronting anti-blackness wherever it exists, whether in the Caribbean, in Africa, or among African Americans. Let's get to...
That's what we're doing. The whole delineation thing is bringing the divisiveness to the forefront. So the letter that you read, they, like I said, they didn't articulate the situation very well. The reason why they came out with ADOS or FBA was to delineate. a distinct ethnic group. It's not about hating someone. I don't dislike someone. Oh, you from Jamaica? Oh, I don't like you. Nah. Now, if you come with the smoke, yeah. Like, there's a conversation I had with a brother on Remsen Ave one day. It's a Jamaican cat. In this bar, what's their name? Somewhere else. It's on Remsen Ave, on the main drag. I used to call it nowhere else. 'Cause on the time I went is when I didn't have nowhere else to go. I was bored. I go have me a beer. And we got into that conversation about they try to call us dumb because we don't take advantage of the opportunities that are in the United States. And then my response is, well, you have your own country. Why did you leave your own country? Because of the opportunities. You got your own country. Why you couldn't make it happen in your own country? You have your own country. Colonialism. Oh, it's the white man. So you think if you live away from the white man, it's harder than if you live with the white man. But come on. It's the same thing. It just manifests itself in a different manner. But it's the exact same thing. Just like the so-called global south, they're poor by design. It's not an accident. But that's changing because China has better deals. The West, they missed out on it. They have that master-slave complex, so they missed out, and they're going to let China slide in and make better deals because they're not trying to tell the people how to live.
The next point. Point number 4. Black immigrants just want to make money and don't care about the fight. This argument is reductionist and misleading. If FBAs really want to understand why African immigrants focus on making money instead of activism, they need to understand how the US has actively destroyed Africa.
No, she didn't say it's not true, because it is true.
Through imperialism. Let's take the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, for instance. Patrice Lumumba was the first democratically elected leader of the Congo. The US and Belgium orchestrated his assassination because he wanted to keep Congo's resources out of Western hands.
This is true. Read the diary of economic hitman. They purposely keep these countries broke so that the people in the West can live good. And they did the same thing to Iran. Iran was a democracy until allegedly MI6 and CIA destroyed that country because, again, allegedly BP wanted their resources. They didn't want them to nationalize it, so they destroyed that country. That's the stuff they don't talk about. We got to keep Iran down. Well, how about you leave them alone and let them do their own thing? Let's go.
His death led to decades of dictatorship and resource exploitation. And this pattern repeated itself across the African continent. The US supported apartheid South Africa, keeping Nelson Mandela in prison, and the CIA helped overthrow Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah. African economies.
This is true. They do. They like that USAID, the regime change and all that. When they're talking about regime change, this is what they're talking about. This right here. How they destroyed these damn countries so they can steal their stuff and keep them broke. This is true. But on the same token, you have to acknowledge when they come here, they don't want to rock with us. She's not saying that they don't. They're all about getting rich, which is something we need to be doing. This is why FBA came up in the first place. This is why Brother Tariq was talking about delineating. And other brothers, Professor Black Truth and Jason Black. It's time to delineate. It's time to circle our wagons and build ourselves up. This ain't about hating any other group of people. This is about building ourselves up. But for whatever reason, they get to do it and it's okay, but if we do it, we're divisive. So this person that wrote the letter, the letter is not very good. Let's see. Their kung fu is not very good.
were crippled by IMF and World Bank policies designed to keep them dependent. So when African immigrants come to the US to work hard and build wealth, it's often because their home countries were robbed by the same American system that oppresses African Americans. I mean, let's be real. Why should African immigrants feel guilty for simply wanting a better life when the US played a key role in keeping Africa underdeveloped? Some FBAs call African immigrants cowards for fleeing their country. But let's be real for a second. If you lived in a war-torn country or a collapsed economy, wouldn't you leave for a better future? This doesn't mean they hate FBAs. It means they are survivors, just like the enslaved Africans who survived the Middle Passage. You know, when...
Well, they say that you fled because we stood 10 toes down and we fought back in the land that we're in. So that's how they see it. So, again, they don't come here. She's proven why FBA exists. They don't come here to rock with us. They come here for monetary gains. So it is true. It is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you want to be your own group, then let us be our own group. If it's not divisive for people to call themselves Somalian and Ethiopian and Nigerian and Ghanaian and Jamaican and all that, then how is FBA divisive? Because they're doing the exact same thing. Let's rock and roll.
Africans come to America, their first instinct is survival. Not because they don't care about black struggles, but because they are literally trying to lift their families out of generational poverty. Let's get to the next point. Number 5, the lie that FBAs are indigenous to America. Many FBA supporters now push the outrageous claim that they are indigenous to the US and that some of them were in America before the transatlantic slave trade, as if they have no connection to Africa.
I don't know about all that craziness. You can watch all that. Even if let's say there were some blacks here before the Atlantic slave trade, you still came from there first. So I'm going to leave that one alone. I'm not even getting into that. My whole thing is, if FBA is divisive, then every other ethnic group out there is also divisive. The moment they hyphenate their name and call themselves something else, they're being divisive. And we're going to leave that there. Not going to drag it out, my brothers. If you haven't already, smash that like button. Smash that subscribe button. Ring that notification bell. And I'll see you brothers in the next video. Peace.